Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, take your time. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. A stranger coming into this room who didn't realize what was up. And if they came in here and saw this lineup all dressed in black with Moya Doherty in the middle, they would probably think they were in for the Riverdance show. And given the age group, they would think Mary Louise O'Donnell was behind this. Looking at Ed Walsh, a very fast mover, I think he would fit the role of Michael Flatley. But everybody who gets up here thanks Joe for inviting them to speak, and I have rather mixed feelings about it. I am the 87th person to speak from this platform this week, and there have been about 300 contributions from the floor. And Joe said to me, Eddie, when you get up there, will you sum it up for those who missed some of it? So thanks for that, Joe. I really appreciate that. Okay. The question posed by Joe to this final thing is, how can we learn from the mistakes of the past? How can we learn from the mistakes of the past? And God knows we've made some mistakes, and build a better republic for the future. The Taoiseach, in a recent document called a National Risk Assessment, also posed that question. And he answers that question about what are the risks to screwing it up again, to put it bluntly. He lists nuclear war, pandemics, food safety, terrorism, a whole series of external threats. But he does not mention the biggest threat, and one that is always present, and that is the shortcomings of our system of governance, the enemy within, if you wish. And what makes that such a big risk, it's a risk that dare not speak its name. It's not in the list of risks produced by the government about what could jeopardize our future. Now, we have seen examples all this week of the political system in action. We have seen examples of the fruits of the political system that we have. I don't need to list the successes of our political system, but I'll just mention two big ones. One is the curse of short-termism. We have seen it in relation to rural Ireland, in relation to energy this week, housing, water, health, nursing homes, all these things. A question was asked on this platform, I think yesterday or today, how long is the planning cycle that we need to tackle the things that matter to us? How long is the planning cycle? And the answer was the next election. So we really are cursed with the political system that by design, it's nothing to do with the individual politicians, it's designed to deliver short-term solutions that are popular. We also saw the instinct in the political system to retain control over the police, for example. After all that's happened within the guards, within the justice system, and the promise of new authority, it's already being watered down. As somebody said to me, the mice got at it. Also, we've heard Catherine Murphy talk about a feature of the political system, the secrecy. Now, Ed Walsh and others here this evening, several people, have hoped for a change in the political system. Well, one of the drum beats coming through this week is don't hold your breath. Michael MacDowell on day one did offer a particular concrete solution to the election of the Count Corla, but beyond that, he basically said you're not going to see much change in the political system, the electoral system. It suits those who are in power, and they're not going to change it anytime soon. Noel Dempsey got up, did a forensic analysis of the political system and the electoral system, and said, folks, it ain't going to happen anytime soon. Rossa White, an economist from the National Treasury Management Authority, also had the same point to make. And he offered suggestions like Ed's about the list system from Holland and from the other green countries that he cited. So what I'm saying is, this is my takeaway from this week, frankly, is that we have a political system that is very dysfunctional in many, many ways, and we're stuck with it. That's the stark reality. Now, and we're stuck with a system that, in the words of the Taoiseach, caused catastrophic consequences to thousands of our citizens. So we have a system that caused catastrophic consequences to thousands of our citizens and is not likely to change. So where is there a glimmer of light? I mean, on what basis? Where is the room for manoeuvre for moving forward? And we did see that this week. And that was in the presentation on the life of Ken Whitaker. Ken Whitaker was voted by the population of Ireland as the most popular Irishman of the 20th century, a civil servant. And I believe that if we're stuck on the political system, we can make some progress and substantial progress if we put some hope in the civil service, in the administrative system. The civil servants pose a question for themselves in one of the papers they produced. The question is it the duty of a civil servant to follow his conscience and his professionalism and moral conscience, or should they follow the instructions of their political masters? Very profound question. There are really two groups within the public service, as I see it, both in their behaviour and in their statements in answering that question. One group answered the question by saying, well, the minister is duly appointed and my job is to follow his instructions. Now, that attitude is played out in what Catherine Murphy experienced over the last several weeks. You had civil servants who prepared at least 20 answers to parliamentary questions that frustrated the right of Catherine Murphy and you, the public, to know what was going on. And that's very common. It happens all the time where notes are not taken because it could be FOIable. So there's a particular attitude, if you like, among some civil servants, which is that their job is, their primacy, that what comes first is protecting the political system as opposed to the public interest. There's another group of people that we've seen also in the last number of years. People who have adopted a different view, what I call the stance of a free man and a free woman, and I'll come to that in a second. We've had Patrick Honohan speaking out, regardless of the political consequences or discomfort. We have had Gordon Jays on the radio on Sunday, speaking out plainly as to what was needed in the domain of childcare. We have had a senior civil servant, the Secretary General of the Department of Public Service, putting it on the record that Joan Burton should not give the PPS numbers to Irish Water. We've had a number of examples. Now, these are people who, in my view, are, if you like, the freedom fighters of 2016. Because what we got in 1916 was a free state, but that does not mean that we have depth of freedom, which is the freedom to speak the truth and to challenge the status quo. The banking inquiry illustrates this in many ways, because the banking inquiry, what's interesting about it is that there was no villain, there was no smoking gun. As Elaine Byrne said in the Sunday Post, there was no gotcha. But what she did say, there was a poison in the system. And I see it as that it was not pilot error or pilot corruption that caused the crash. It was metal fatigue, and by that I mean corrosion over decades of the relationship between ministers and senior civil servants. That joint, that knee joint or hip joint, that juncture was weakened and was corroded such that it caused the problems that we have. Now, so what that means is that I'm saying that the kind of attitude that we need in the civil service was captured by Maurice Hayes here at another conference, where he said we need a civil service that functions as the fifth estate. Think of what that means. A degree of separation and independence from the political system where the responsibilities and accountabilities are clear. We don't have that. We have a Faustian pact where they're tied together and their responsibilities and their accountabilities are conflated, so none of them can ever be held accountable. I relied on a book by Philip Pettit, who is an Irish philosopher based in Australia, to make my point about the free man. And this is the attitude that I look to, and there are examples of it within the public service. Sorry, I should say that a question that was asked to Anne Chambers during her session on Whittaker was, do you think we'll ever get a Whittaker again? And she kind of more or less said no. I would dispute that view. My experience of civil servants is that it's full of Whittakers. It's full of them. People who join and who would be inspired by and who will subscribe to the same values as Whittaker. But somehow it's not being released, and somehow at the very apex of the organisation there are problems. But these two camps, if you like. I'll read from Pettit. A free man in the Republican tradition does not have to bow or scrape, to toady or kowtow, to fawn or to flatter. They do not have to live on their wits and walk on eggshells. They are their own men and women. You are free when you can walk tall, look others in the eye, speak the truth and seek the truth, without deference timidity, or fear of interference. Deference and ingratiation are the hallmarks of subjection. This deference and ingratiation characteristic of a subject people, remains embedded in some of our institutions at the most senior echelons, and we have paid a price for that. In conclusion, I quote from Martin O'Kane, well-known Irish writer in the latter half of the last century. Martin O'Kane said, "Nuair a dimig na Sasanig, níor dimig an Dlí." When the Brits went, the law didn't go. You still had to obey the law. And I'd paraphrase him. Nuair a dimig na Sasanig, níor dimig an Plá-Más agus an Gaeilge Slí. In other words, when the Brits went, we did not dispense with our inclination to ingratiate, Plá-Más, and to defer. My hope, my dream for the next decades and century ahead is a civil service that's characterised, that you could describe as the fifth estate, with civil servants ethical, competent, and free to speak truth to power in the public interest. In conclusion, a friend of mine had a look at the schedule for this week on the web tonight. He said he was looking in. I hope he is. Hello, Ian. And Ian said to me, "Jesus, Eddie," he said, "it'll be like trying to get a drink from a fire hydrant." And that's what it's been like all week. Great pleasure, Joe. Thanks very much for inviting me.